I risked my chance at love by accusing my boyfriend of cheating. Now he's about to get married to another woman, and I want him back. It was scorching hot that day at the park. The heat from the sun was nothing compared to the frustration I was feeling because the money I had in my bag was gone. I searched my bag frantically, withholding the tears that threatened to fall out of my eyes. It was in my state of misery I caught sight of a figure slowly strolling over to me. I didn't bother looking up at first because I was trying to figure out how I would embark on a long road trip without a dime. And no, there was no money in my account either. I had withdrawn the entire money in my account and used part of it to purchase the bus ticket from Adamawa to Lagos. The remaining was supposed to carry me through the journey, but it was gone. "Hello," I heard the voice again, and slowly I lifted my head. His muscular physique was the first to get my attention. He was tall and had broad shoulders. "Are you crying?" he asked as I sniffed hard and looked away. I hated feeling frustrated because my only way out of that was tears. He pulled me into a warm embrace, and the moment my head touched his chest, I stiffened. The warmth from his embrace was so soothing that I almost fell asleep on his chest. The scent of his cologne was addictive, and his voice was heavenly. "What happened?" he asked, and I went ahead to narrate how I misplaced the last money I had. "This is really hard luck. Traveling without money is not nice," he said, and I nodded. "I'm Wealth," he said and stretched out his hands. "Nice name. Hope your name speaks for you," I joked, and we both laughed. "I'm Ifemi," I finally said as we locked gazes. "That is a beautiful name. My beloved," he complimented with a beam. "Did youth service bring you here?" I took a pause as my stomach churned in excitement. "Of course. I am a corper. What would bring me all the way to Adamawa if not youth service?" I asked, and we laughed again. We talked about our camp experiences, and in a matter of minutes, it felt like we've known each other for years. I even forgot that I was crying earlier. "What's your seat number?" he asked when it was time to board. 30, I replied, looking into my ticket. His face fell at that point, and I knew why. We were seats apart. I made to tell him that it was fine, but he scurried off to exchange his seat with someone else. When he returned, he had a new ticket. 31. "Now we are seat partners." He smiled as we finally boarded. The journey was so sweet. Sitting with Wealth surprisingly made me feel safe. I never believed in love at first sight, but meeting Wealth changed that. His voice, manner of approach, and aura made me fall for him. And at this point, I started seeing him as my man. I got to know him better. He was from Lagos, just like me, and loved playing chess. That was another green flag, since that was my best game. 5 hours into the journey, and we looked like partners already. I slept on his shoulders, he caressed my cheeks, bought me food and snacks, and taught me things. 10 hours into the journey, and we shared a kiss already. How it happened was surprising to both of us, because we never believed that we could kiss someone on the first day of meeting them. It just happened, though. Perhaps because it was dark and most of the passengers were already asleep. I can never forget how soft his lips were as they pressed against mine that night on the bus. We stayed still for a while, as though the world was on a standstill. The minute we pulled away from the kiss, it felt like we were officially lovers. The bus engine broke down in the early hours of the next day, but I didn't actually care. Wealth was the highlight of the journey, and I was enjoying every minute I spent with him. He got me food and even gave me 5,000 to hold since I had no money with me. 15 hours into the journey, and we were already talking about our life plans. "Life will be good with you. Our energy level is so similar," he had said to me. I smiled so hard and looked into his eyes. They looked sincere, so sincere and calm. "I'm already imagining life with you." "I will be the happiest woman on earth," I replied while he placed a soft kiss on my hands. I meant every single word I uttered. My head screamed that this man was for me. I felt in deep down my soul, and he knew. We entered Lagos after a very long time on the road. My head was aching and my feet were swollen. But then he kept on urging me to remain patient since we would soon be in our various homes. 20 hours into the journey, right there in the middle of Lagos unending traffic, we told each other how frequent we would meet. It felt so real, and I couldn't wait. We promised to see each other at least 3 times in a week, and it sounded perfect. 21 hours into the journey, and some minutes away to the final park, we talked about the name for our kids. We chatted about every other tiny details, and as the bus drove into its final park, I was 100% certain that I was in love. We alighted and stood for a while, not really saying so much. It felt like we missed each other already. Actually, I was beginning to miss him. He pulled me into a warm hug and ordered a ride home for me. He was the sweetest soul. My ride arrived, but just when I was about to leave, I observed him waving at someone. "Hold on," I said to the driver as my eyes darted to who it was. It was a young lady, beautiful and charming, but there was something more about her. She was pregnant. My heart dropped and my knees felt weak. From where I stood, I watched how they pulled each other into a very warm and long hug. He even gave her a kiss on her forehead. I slowly entered my ride and dejectedly made my way back home. The tears that dropped off my eyes was uncontrollable. The driver even asked if I was okay. It was so painful to plan your future with someone and see it crash in a split second. What was worse was that I was in love with him. The minute I got home, I deleted his number out of rage and blocked him. The love on the bus ends on the bus. That was what I thought until I saw him that day at the mall with a lady different from the pregnant one. The moment I set my eyes on him, I froze. I had a lot of questions in my mind, but majorly I battled with the decision to make. I could easily turn back, pretend I didn't see him and leave the mall, or walk up to him and get answers. Just as I struggled to come up with a decision, his eyes met mine. It was too late to do anything, and so I stayed still and watched him sauntering over to me. The lady with him took her cart to another side of the mall and resumed shopping. "Hi, Ifemi," he said in a voice that sounded like a whisper. I was blank and unable to say a word. I just stared at him, with the first feelings I felt that day on the bus engulfing my soul again. "Wealth," I called back the minute I found my voice. He smiled firstly and my heart fluttered. Nothing about him changed apart from the fact that he got more handsome. I relished in his scent, even if I was about 4 feet away from him. "You blocked me after that day. I tried to reach you through every means, but—" He was still explaining when I interjected. "Yes, I blocked you. I figured out that whatever it was that happened back there on the bus was fake. We were just blabbing since the journey was boring," I quickly said, and shifted my gaze away from him. Honestly, I was at the verge of exploding in rage, but with the last strength in me, I withdrew that urge. "Why? You know it wasn't fake. It wasn't for me," he explained, peering into my eyes as if he could search through my soul. I gulped down hard and finally lifted my gaze to stare at him again. "What do you mean? The woman that day? The pregnant?" I stuttered as I tried to hold on to my stance. My emotions were beginning to get a hold on me and I didn't like it. "The pregnant lady that day? She's my cousin. She was around the park that day and decided to come see me," Wealth explained, and for a minute, it felt like I've just heard wrongly. I staggered and wiped tears off my forehead. I made to talk, but instead felt a tightening on my throat. "Why? Was that why you blocked me? You didn't even ask me," he dropped with a look of disappointment. I felt cold. Goosebumps jerked out of my skin and I wrapped my arms together in a bid to get a grip of myself. He shifted his gaze away from me and looked around the mall as if in search for someone. "I guess you came here with someone," I said. "Yes, and I have to go now. But then give me a call when you finally decide to think rather than make absurd conclusions," he said, and slipped his business card into my hand. He dashed away immediately and didn't spare me another glance. Think rather than make absurd conclusions? That was an indirect way to call me a stupid person. My eyes were fixed on the complimentary card as I made my way out of the mall. Everything still looked odd, and it was hard to figure out the exact way I felt. Was I excited to see him? Of course I was. Love on the bus doesn't end on the bus like I had thought. He made his way back to me, and that simply meant that fate wanted us together. That night was the best night I had in a while. The minute I walked into my room, I dropped my bag on the bed and jumped around excitedly. I screamed and laughed and called my friends to tell them that they might be having a wedding to plan. It sounded weird in their ears, but I didn't care. Wealth had told me to think rather than making conclusions, and that was what I planned to do. The best thing was to start from afresh, since the future we created back there on the bus didn't die. When I finally got a grip of myself, I picked up his card and dialed his number. I felt nervous and anxious, but a smile was still plastered on my lips. "Hi," His sweet baritone voice came from the other end, and I smiled. I think it would be best to start by apologizing for making wrong assumptions earlier. Maybe we can start afresh? I asked, and the line went silent for a minute. Sure, we can. And that was the beginning of another love ride. Wealth took me out on dates, called me almost every minute of the day, and didn't fail to send me gifts whenever I was feeling low. There was a problem, though. He never made an attempt to kiss or get intimate with me. That was the only part of our relationship that had an error. Severally, I made to ask him why, but shoved it aside since I didn't want to sound desperate. I will always care about you. I'm glad we met that day on the bus. He would always tell me every time we spoke on the call. He was so sweet, and in him I found peace. I said a lot of good things about him to my friends and didn't fail to show them every picture of him I had on my phone. I still remember that day in April. My friend had called me the minute she arrived at the home of her client. She was a makeup artist who also offered home services. The client had called her to come over and do her makeover. I think I'm about to do a makeover for Wealth's wife, she had said with a hushed voice. I could tell that she didn't want to be caught. I'm staring at their wedding portrait in this living room, she added. Next I saw the picture, and indeed, it was Wealth. That explained why he never went intimate with me. He was respecting his marriage. I was in his friend zone, and I didn't know. When I asked him, he placed the blame on me. He had no woman when we met, but had to move on after I blocked him. His moving on gave him a wife, that woman he was with at the mall. The first one I had a misconception about was wrong. The second one I didn't bother asking about was the real one. Again, I blocked him. This time, forever. My ideology still stands, though. Love on the bus ends on the bus.